Did you know that gestational diabetes affects up to 1 in 10 pregnancies? This condition causes high blood sugar during pregnancy and can increase health risks for both mother and baby. If left unmanaged, it may lead to complications such as high birth weight, preeclampsia, and an increased risk of type 2 diabetes later in life. The good news is that gestational diabetes can often be managed through healthy nutrition, regular physical activity, blood sugar monitoring, and medical care when needed. Early screening and proper treatment play a crucial role in ensuring a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby. Let's explore what every expecting mother should know about gestational diabetes.
All right, let's get right into it. In this explainer, we're going to completely demystify gestational diabetes. We'll be tracing it all the way from its biological roots right up to the clinical side of things. Now, I know the title sounds super clinical, but honestly, at its core, this is a story about how the human body adapts and, sometimes really struggles to adapt to the absolutely massive physical undertaking of growing a completely new human being. To really wrap our heads around this condition, we have to start with a pretty fascinating question. How is it that the natural, life-giving changes happening inside a mother's body can suddenly create this huge, unexpected hurdle? I mean, the body is doing exactly what it's supposed to do to nurture a baby, right? Yet those exact same mechanisms can somehow trigger a metabolic imbalance. It's a complete biological paradox, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. So here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with the pregnancy hormone surge, then define gestational diabetes, jump into screening and diagnosis, go over treatment and management, and finally wrap up with delivery and postpartum care. Okay, section 1, the pregnancy hormone surge, the biological root. Let's look at where it all begins, the well-meaning but honestly sometimes disruptive environment of the placenta. Think of these hormones, we're talking estrogen, progesterone, placental lactogen, prolactin, and cortisol, as this crew of really hardworking construction workers building a home for the baby. They are absolutely essential. They rise massively to support the growing fetus, usually hitting their peak around 32 weeks. But there's a catch, a major side effect. These hormones inadvertently go around changing the locks on the mother's cells, so her own insulin keys basically stop working. We call this peripheral insulin resistance. The mother's body needs way more energy, and therefore more insulin, but these placental hormones are literally standing in the way of her insulin doing its job. Moving on to section 2, defining gestational diabetes, when physiology shifts. What actually happens when a mother's body just can't keep up with this heavy hormonal load? Well, that brings us right to our definition. Because the mother's body suddenly lacks the ability to compensate for these massive physiological shifts, abnormal fasting and post-meal blood sugar levels start to appear. So gestational diabetes, or GDM, is officially defined as any degree of glucose intolerance that starts or is first recognized during pregnancy. And here's the absolute most important part to remember. This label sticks whether a mother ends up needing insulin, whether the metabolic shift is mild or severe, or honestly, even if the condition sticks around after delivery. The whole shebang falls under this umbrella. Now, we absolutely have to differentiate between temporary insulin resistance caused by pregnancy and pre-existing diabetes. If a pregnant woman shows up with high blood sugar at her very first prenatal visit, that's what we call overt or frank diabetes. Basically, the diabetes was already there before she got pregnant. It just hadn't been caught yet. Gestational diabetes, on the flip side, is glucose intolerance that develops as a direct result of the pregnancy itself. It usually pops up a bit later on, right when those placental hormones are really going into overdrive. And if you're sitting there wondering, okay, but how rare is this? Take a look at this number. Gestational diabetes affects an estimated 7 to 10% of all pregnancies worldwide. Let that sink in. Almost 1 in 10. So if you or someone you love are dealing with this, please remember it's an incredibly common biological side effect. It is a physiological mismatch, not a personal failure. Your placenta is just, doing its job a little too aggressively. Let's move to section 3, screening and diagnosis, the clinical detection. Because this is so incredibly common, doctors have a very streamlined system to catch it. To find out if someone has this, you can expect a really straightforward 2-step universal screening process. This usually goes down between 24 and 28 weeks of pregnancy. Step 1 is the O'Sullivan test. You just drink a 50-gram glucose solution. No fasting required at all. You just drink it, and they check your blood an hour later. If your levels come back a bit high, specifically over 140 milligrams per deciliter, then you move to step 2. Step 2 is the big one, the 100-gram oral glucose tolerance test, or OGTT. For this one, you do have to fast overnight for 8 hours, drink a much sweeter 100-gram liquid, and then get your blood drawn right then and again at 1, 2, and 3 hours after drinking it. During that 3-hour marathon test, doctors are hunting for some very specific thresholds. They check your fasting baseline first. Then they watch how your body clears that massive sugar spike. Actually, scratch that. It's more like an insulin stress test at hour 1, hour 2, and hour 3. If your body's insulin just can't pull that sugar down fast enough, leaving 2 or more of these numbers in the red zone, well, that's when you officially get the gestational diabetes diagnosis. Which brings us to Section 4, Treatment and Management, the Rule of 3. The really good news here is that if you do get diagnosed, there are highly effective, super actionable steps to keep both mom and baby healthy. The clinical guidelines rely heavily on a trifecta of management. First up, a balanced, non-restrictive nutritional plan. You might think you need to cut out all carbs, but no, you actually need carbs, about 40 to 50% of your diet, in fact. You balance that with 20% protein and 30 to 40% fats, and spread it out over 3 meals and 2 snacks to stop those wild sugar spikes and crashes. Second is daily physical activity. Honestly, something as simple as a moderate intensity walk right after a meal works wonders. It naturally pulls that floating sugar out of your bloodstream and straight into your muscles. And third, if diet and exercise aren't quite enough to beat back those stubborn placental hormones, that's when pharmacological treatment is introduced. If medication is needed, insulin is the gold standard. Different types of insulin are used to seamlessly mimic what your body would normally do. Check this out. You might take a sharp, fast-acting spike of insulin to handle a big breakfast, while a long-acting insulin, like glargine, gives you a low, steady baseline across the entire 24 hours to keep things perfectly in check while you sleep. It's really all about perfectly mirroring a healthy pancreas. Now, let's be real. Hearing the word insulin while you're pregnant, yeah, that can be incredibly scary. But for mothers who need that pharmacological support, I want to share an absolutely crucial, reassuring fact. The insulin molecule is physically just too large to cross the placenta. No way it gets through. It stays strictly in the mother's bloodstream, fixing her blood sugar levels without ever entering the baby's system. Huge sigh of relief, right? And finally, Section 5, Delivery and Postpartum Care. Reaching the finish line. As we get to the end of the pregnancy, clinical focus shifts heavily toward ensuring a safe delivery and protecting the mother's long-term health. So your delivery plan is going to be highly individualized. It's carefully mapped against how well your glucose levels were maintained. If you managed everything with just diet, amazing. The goal is normal expectant management and a standard vaginal delivery at term. If you needed medication, doctors might suggest inducing labor slightly early, usually between 37 and 39 weeks. If the baby has grown a bit too large, a condition called macrosomia, specifically over 4,500 grams, an elective C-section is usually advised. But listen to this. Regardless of how you deliver, the ultimate laser-focused goal during labor is keeping the mother's blood sugar incredibly stable, right between 70 and 110. Why? Because if mom's blood sugar is too high during labor, the baby pumps out extra insulin to handle it. Then, the second they're born and cut off from mom's sugar supply, their own excess insulin can cause their blood sugar to crash dangerously low. But then, the moment the placenta is delivered, those disruptive hormones literally plummet. Gestational diabetes typically ends almost instantly, and any insulin treatments are stopped right away in the hospital. However, you're not totally off the hook. Even after the baby arrives, follow-up testing at 6 to 8 weeks postpartum is absolutely vital. Women who experience gestational diabetes are at a significantly higher long-term risk for developing type 2 diabetes later in life. So you'll do a new 75-gram glucose test to see where your body has settled. A fasting glucose between 100 and 125 means prediabetes, and anything over 126 indicates diabetes. It's a crucial check-in to establish your baseline moving forward. We really hope this explainer empowered you to navigate these crazy hormonal shifts with a lot more confidence, because understanding the why behind the clinical guidelines is half the battle. Knowledge is your absolute best tool here. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with one vital thought for your wellness journey. Gestational diabetes acts as a unique, early warning stress test for your body. Sure, it usually ends at delivery, but are you prepared to use this knowledge to protect your long-term health moving forward? Think about it. Thanks so much for learning with us today.